Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by 3 Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for coffee and conversation.
Well, welcome everybody. I'm here with my esteemed colleagues, Teresa and Danielle. Hello, ladies.
Hi there. Happy holidays.
So I see you both have red on. Part of the season, right? It's the season to be jolly. But, today we want to discuss what happens after that, the New Year's thing, the New Year's resolution thing. We all kind of get trapped in. Let me ask this question. I've asked this many times on presentation. So who here is, which one of you are still doing something you made a New Year's resolution to do? Yeah, they see both hands go up because I know both of you, you're very disciplined and you know about the topic we're going to share today about Kaizen and the way to be successful, the way to not fail in something you want to do with lifestyle change. So I'm not surprised with you two. Well, you're going to have more to share, but if you would allow me, I'm just going to pontificate for a minute here because this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And then I'd like you both to weigh in. So why do we fail at New Year's resolutions? Well, the fact is that our brain is programmed to do that. There's a part of our brain called the fear center that is there to keep us alive. And whenever we're facing a challenge, that usually kicks in with some fear and it drives a lot of other things. But when we take on something that's too big, either from the outside or we decide to, this amygdala part of the brain fires and it basically shuts off many of the functions that we need to succeed in our New Year's resolutions. It's kind of counterintuitive, but that's what happens. So what do you do about this? It's well known that, and because we've talked about it many times, and so if you listen to this podcast, you've heard it many times, that the Japanese have an approach to this called Kaizen, Kaizen, which basically is change in small steps, because then this amygdala doesn't fire and we're more likely to be successful. So first of all, as we start the new year, okay, you want to change some things, but don't start from a position of self-loathing, or disgusted with yourself. Start from a point of view that I want to grow. In order to be healthy and have a healthy longevity, I need to grow. And so I'm going to grow. And it's a New Year's growth commitment. How's that? And then the way Kaizen works is that it's about small steps to a big goal. So first of all, you ask yourself, why? Why do I want to change? What is the reason? So for example, let's take weight. Okay, I want to lose weight. Why do you want to lose weight? Well, I want to be thinner. Why do you want to be thinner? If you're younger, maybe it's to get more dates, or you just don't like the way you look, or you're getting unhealthy, or you have pre-diabetes, or you want to have a healthy longevity. What is the reason? You should drill it down because it does make a difference as you go through the process of change, to be reminded why. And so what is it you want to change? Okay, so with weight, what does your doc say is a good weight for you? What do you want to achieve? It should be realistic. And so that's the big up there goal, okay? But that's not the one you shoot for. That's usually what you shoot for in a New Year's resolution that you fail by February to meet. But that's just sort of a general over the horizon type goal. What you do is you ask yourself, what is the smallest thing that I can do to work towards the horizon there, to work towards what I want to achieve? And this is why, and this is what I want to achieve. And what's the smallest step I can take? And then you make that your goal. That's your goal. So I had this patient, Tony, you've probably heard me tell the story that he was a heart attack ready to happen. He was overweight. He was pre-diabetic. He was sedentary. He had high blood pressure, and he was not going to do well. So lots of attempts to change, and he tried, but then he'd fail and he'd recidivate and go back to where he was. So having found out about Kaizen, writing my book, I said, Tony, how about this next week? All you do is stand during TV commercials. And boy, he did that. He really felt good about that. And then I said, okay, now walk in place. And he says, really, that's all? I said, yeah, that's all. And so he did that. And so he over the weeks, he got a sense of self-esteem and self-confidence, self-efficacy, we can call it, that he could do this. And occasionally we'd make a goal, a small goal that he didn't make. And we said, oh, Tony, we just did too much. Just ratchet it back a little bit. And so he patiently progressed over a year and, off all meds, normal blood pressure, no more prediabetes. And he has an active lifestyle, not crazy. He just walks quite a bit, walks about 20 miles a week on purpose. And then his lifestyle, he parks further away, takes stairs, all of those things he does. So he did it in small steps. So he asked himself, we together, why and what did he want? He wanted to stay healthy and live to see his grandchildren and to see his daughter get married and then grandchildren and what it was. And we discussed what was the smallest thing he can do. And so the next thing you do after you say, what's the smallest thing I can do? Well, then set that as a goal. And imagine yourself doing it. It's almost like these athletes who say like a diver imagines themselves going through the dive as they get out on the board, sort of programming your head to do it and seeing success. And then when you reach it, what's the next goal? So really what we're talking about, say, if you want a New Year's resolution, know in general why you want to change, what you want to change, and then realize that you're going to have, let's just say 52 commitments, one a week, a commitment to do something. We can call it a goal, but it's a small thing, a small step. And you 52 of them, and maybe you won't make one. And so you ratcheted it back and then you make it. So at the end of that time, you're going to be quite a place. We once had a lady talk to us and said, if you're walking in a direction and you change your direction by 1 degree on the compass, eventually you're going to end up quite a ways from where you would have been had you not made that small change. And that's an excellent, excellent analogy and metaphor for what we're trying to achieve with Kaizen, isn't it? I mean, you can do this. And in this way, you cannot fail, really. If you're realistic and patient, you really cannot fail, can you? Well, thank you for letting me get on the soapbox like that, ladies. I know people are much more anxious to hear what you folks have to say, what you two have to say, because you say it so well. And sometimes you're a little more realistic and humane than me, but in any case, and you're both coaches, certified coaches. So you know exactly how to deal with this as you do with it every day. So thank you for letting me go off like that. So Danielle, what do you think?
So Roger, we like when you pontificate. And I do have some thoughts on the subject, kind of springboarding off of your talk on Kaizen. I think it's important to note too that change can be more than just what we think of with a New Year's resolution, like a tangible something we don't want, like we want to quit smoking or we want to lose weight, versus something we do want, like exercise 3 times a week and write a book. But there's also mindset. I want to be kinder, or maybe I want to not stress so much, or I want to be more intentional with time, or maybe I want to be more flexible and not so rigid. So we can look at change in a few different ways.
It's such a good point, Danielle. We think about what we want to do, but you raised such a good point. How do we want to be?
Yeah, so I won't go into too much detail about the trans theoretical model of change because I don't want to put our listeners to sleep. But in general, you have your pre-contemplation and your contemplation state, which is you haven't taken action, you're thinking about taking action. It might happen in the next 6 months, it might not. We're kind of talking about as we go into the new year and are approaching, going through the holiday season, the preparation stage. So people listening and thinking about their New Year's resolution are intending to take action like within the next 30 days. And you might have already started making some of those actions. But here's the thing, once you get in that action stage, unless you make it to that 6 month stage where then you becomes maintenance, it's really hard to keep it up. So Roger's already given you some tools, and Teresa and I are going to add a few more that you might want to add to your toolbox to help make those changes in the new year stick. So with the trans-theoretical model, it talks a lot about pros and cons. And a lot of times people have had their list, why do I want to change? How am I going to go about it? Well, maybe I don't want to. Maybe there's something I don't want to give up. And usually when those pros start to outweigh the cons, that's when we kind of get into the action stage.
That's right, Danielle. And sometimes it's a dialogue inside of your head, like, what do I want most versus what do I want now? That's the question. So often the what I want now wins out, but very often what we want now and what we want most are contradictory, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because
Maybe that's the tipping point when we really can hone in on what we want most. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, because then you don't have the instant gratification. You don't have to have whatever the thing is now if in the long run. So for example, someone who's trying to quit smoking or eating less sugar or whatever it is, it's, but I want it in the now, but do I want that for my health 6 months from now, a year or 2 years? And once you really hone in, then I think you can start to make that change. And I noticed the other thing that I think kind of foils people is like the self-efficacy. So they may believe they can change, but when you ask people, well, what about when you're in a tempting situation? It's kind of helpful to have an if then, when you're seeking out, say, social support, hopefully your friends are on board. But if for some reason you go somewhere and there's whatever that thing is, like you go to meet a bunch of people and everyone's drinking and you're trying not to, say, if I go to this place and I see people drinking and I have the urge and I know I don't want to, I'm going to go over to the bar and get a soda or something else, like have some kind of if then, or if I go into this restaurant and everybody's ordering this, I'm going to be prepared because I'm going to have a snack before I go so I don't overeat, or just kind of have some little engineered changes in place for when that happens. And then do some, I would say, environmental engineering. For us, it's simply not having all the cookies and candies in the house and putting a bowl of fruit on the table. It's if it's not there, it's for me to look at and think about. I'm not going to absentmindedly reach my hand in and grab some candy. That's just a for instance. And the last thing, and again, I'm not going to go deeply into, say, the SMART model of change that comes from George Duran, who is a consultant and a former director of corporate planning. And it's a great model for change. But what's important kind of reiterates what Roger spoke about earlier, taking that small Kaizen step and make that step measurable. So for example, how will I know I've succeeded? And that success might be, I did go to that event. Everybody was doing the thing that I didn't want to do, whether it was eating a certain thing or drinking a certain thing. And I didn't do it and I went home, and that is a success. And it's a timed success. Like I can measure it and it's happened. So give yourself something small, have an indicator for when you've succeeded. And if you need to, when you want to do it by, because if you just sent some random never expiration date, it's a little bit harder than when you set little tiny goals along the way. And I'm sure Teresa's got some really great stuff to add to that.
Absolutely, Dan. And Danielle, if it's a goal around, I want to be more kind, for example, then measurability, how do you know when you get there, becomes a little bit trickier, but not insurmountable, right? Probably things could still be measured. Random acts of kindness might be one way to measure the kindness that a person feels inside of them, for example. Do you have other thoughts about that?
I do too. And those are really great, but sometimes it's just taking a breath. So
for people who are trying to be less snarky, maybe they're sarcastic and they've hurt someone's feelings, say, and they realize, oh, I don't mean to be unkind, but it's hurting people's feelings. Just stop a beat. Like if you're ready to say something, take a few seconds to pause and filter and say, is that a kind thing to say? And stop yourself. And there's your win. You've just done it. You've succeeded, and it's timed.
Measurable. Yep. So good.
Masterpiece is driven by data and powered by content. Maximizing healthy longevity is achievable at all times with the right metrics and content, enabling informed decisions. Powered by Masterpiece can support your community in the critical areas of focus that drive healthy longevity for your residents, staff, and community. Learn more at mymasterpieceliving.com.
Well, I have a couple thoughts too, which I think are complementary to Danielle's. I would point out first and foremost, what are your limiting beliefs? So those usually sound like, I'm just not the person who ... fill in the blank, or I've never been able to ... So the limiting beliefs are just thoughts. They're just thoughts that we have thought about ourselves for a long time, potentially even decades. So, which means that they're optional. Limiting beliefs are self-fulfilling prophecies, like all thoughts. So, if you really believe you're just not the person who could ever be at a healthy weight, at a goal weight, then I promise, if you keep that belief, then you will never indeed achieve your goal weight. So, we have to really dig up our limiting beliefs and challenge them. Just because you haven't done it yet doesn't mean that it can't be done, right? Impossible is only temporary. That's what I will say about limiting beliefs. The adult brain likes to look back and find the evidence that it's possible. And I don't think that our 18-year-old brain did that, because our 18-year-old brain had no evidence that we could get the degree or land the dream job, right? Or find the perfect mate. But we had no evidence that we could do it at 18, but we just set out and did it. At some point, the adult brain wants evidence that we can achieve something. And guess what? It's not always there. You just haven't achieved it yet. So find those limiting beliefs and start to challenge them by thinking other thoughts, right? And the other bit of advice I would have is be willing to fail. We all know that we learn so much more when we fail, right? And what if we were just courageous enough to fail? The most successful people are the people standing on the biggest piles of failure, right? You've probably heard that. So what if failure was the goal for the sake of learning so much more? The final thing I'll say is in January, we see lots of New Year's resolutions because everyone is motivated to try to make the change, and they tend to fizzle out, as we know, by February. Motivation is a feeling, and like all feelings, it comes from a thought. So notice what thoughts you're thinking in January and January 1st that create motivation for you. When that motivation wanes, I promise you are now thinking different thoughts. So we humans have the opportunity to think thoughts on purpose, and we have to do that with intentionality to create useful feelings like motivation 12 months out of the year to accomplish what the goals that we have set out for ourselves. So that's the trick. That's the hack. What thoughts are you thinking? Thinking thoughts on purpose that genuinely create motivation for you is the ticket to your goals, and also being willing to feel whatever feeling comes up along the way, the desire for instant gratification that flies in the face of your goal, just being willing to feel that discomfort, right? And voting, it's casting a vote for your future self, the version of you that has already achieved the goal.
Yeah, good thoughts. And I have a few more and a couple questions for you, Teresa. But first, what you said about once you get into that and you start to kind of waver in that 6-month period, that's when it's really a good idea to have the social support. You know, sometimes when I'm coaching, I'll say, when you get stuck, what do you need me to say to you? What's the best thing I can do to help you move forward? You can do that if you have a few friends or are willing, like I'm struggling. remind me why I'm doing this again. And sometimes it's like, you're doing this because you want to be healthy or whatever it was that you agreed upon. But I'm so curious about two things, Teresa. You had mentioned that teenagers don't have evidence and yet they do it. But we as adults, we look for the evidence, but what's changed? Is it because we failed and we're afraid to fail again? Or how did we lose that almost childlike, I can do anything attitude?
I don't know when it changes, but the adult brain certainly has accomplished more things than our 18-year-old selves. And the human brain likes evidence. It likes evidence before it acts, right? And this goes back to our very primitive nature of part of our brain in the spirit of safety and security. Let's check the evidence first and make sure that it's possible, right? But we're overriding that with our prefrontal cortex and saying, look, there's no evidence. That's not a problem. Impossible is just temporary. It's all about the right mindset, choosing thoughts on purpose, taking small steps.
Good thoughts. And then it's a devil's advocate question, because it comes up a lot when I'm talking to people who I would say are a little more pessimistic, where they'll say, oh, all these good things are happening. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Mm-hmm. I would say the reality is life is a mix of both good and bad. And it's not the shoe, the other drop. It's just that wave going back and forth. However, when does that shoe dropping become a negative thought versus a realistic thought? And that's kind of a little more nuanced to kind of dissect. So how would you define that for somebody who says, I'm not being pessimistic, I'm just being realistic?
Well, we get to think any thought we want. And some people are very devoted to the thoughts that they currently think, right? So end of conversation, right? The question is, are you willing to examine your thoughts? Do they serve you? Are they even true? Remember, we can't believe everything we think. So are your thoughts true, and are they serving you? Meaning, are they getting you the results that you want? Do they create the feelings that you want to feel? So I'll never argue with anyone about their thoughts. If you like your thoughts and they create feelings that you want to feel for you, that drive action that you want to take, that get you the results you're after, have at it, right? All day, every day. On the other hand, do you have the results you want, right? Are you taking the actions you want to take? Are you feeling the feelings that would very naturally drive action? If not, then it's time to look at your thoughts and question them if you're willing to do so.
That's a really great point, because that applies to people who maybe go to one extreme and are overly pessimistic, but also overly optimistic and smile on the face all the time, even if they're not feeling it, but they're still not really feeling the way they want to feel. So that just doing that check-in to see how you're feeling emotionally and physically is just a good barometer for doing that reality check. Like, is what I'm doing working, or does something else need to be modified a little bit?
That's right.
See, Roger, we can pontificate like with the best of them.
Indeed.
See, so I knew you two would have great things to say. And I think collectively, the three of us, I think with great humanity, compassion, empathy, hopefully we've given you some tools to make this new year one of growth, but one of growth that's attainable and fun. And in spite of all that's going on, that at the end of that year, you're going to be even better than you are, and well on your way to a healthy longevity, and very much aware and enriched by the fact that you know that you can indeed make lifestyle change that's healthy, and that it is not so hard. So happy New Year to everybody, and a good growth journey with your commitments, your 52 commitments, or however you want to approach it. So thank you, ladies. Let's have a great holiday season.
You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.